Pennsylvania. He survived at least 5 attempts on his life, all arranged for or carried out by his dear wife, Frances, and his wife's lover. Twice she arranged for assailants to beat him over the head with baseball bats. On one occasion, she put a tripwire on the basement stairs in their house, hoping that he would trip over it and plummet to his death. Twice she arranged for him to be shot. The first time, she drugged his chicken soup so he would sleep soundly, and he was shot in the head, but miraculously survived. True story. The second time, he was shot in the chest, but only sustained minor injuries. But even more miraculous than Tony's survival was his attitude towards his wife once he found out she was responsible for all of it. Tony, a self-confessed ladies' man, said that he held his wife blameless. When she was found guilty and sent to prison for arranging for his murder, he took their 4 children and visited her every week, every single week. Then when she was released from prison, she went back to their red brick home to resume her married life with Tony. When in an interview with his arm around her, Tony said, "We're more in love now than ever before. I don't understand why people break up over silly little things." Come on, Tony. Wow. Well, that's a little bit extreme, but it's a true story. Last week we looked at, what's love, got to do with it. As we learned, love has everything to do with it. And then some of you remember Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Any of you guys remember that song? Real big hit song. Paul Simon gave us words of wisdom, how to leave, our lover. He said, slip out the back, Jack, make a new plan, Stan. You don't need a decoy, Roy. Just listen to me. Hop on the bus, Gus. You don't need to discuss much. Just drop off the key, Lee, and get yourself free. Well, another great example of what love looks like. And anyway, one way. Today what we're going to be looking at is 50 ways, or almost 50 ways, to stay in love. But there are other ways that you can do. Now, guys and ladies, I encourage you, if you want to destroy the relationship you're in, or if you want to destroy any relationship you're in, here's some really good advice for you. This will work every time. So if you're in a relationship you don't want to be in and you want to destroy it, I encourage you, as your pastor, to do these 8 things. And if you do these 8 things, please don't say I told you to do these 8 things. All right? No, but anyway, number 1, have unrealistic expectations. That'll certainly destroy a relationship. The second thing is make the relationship all about you. Every person loves to love another self-centered person. Never spend time together or set time to spend time together. The best one, hold a grudge. That really builds a relationship. If you're married, never have planned or spontaneous sex. And if you're married with kids, build your life around your children instead of your spouse. Never allow the other person to be right. Always point out the person's faults. And any combination of these will accelerate the destruction of a relationship. Any combination will destroy a relationship. Hopefully you caught the facetiousness. God doesn't want us to destroy our relationships. He doesn't want us to destroy people. He doesn't want to destroy the person that we love. But Tony here, we just wrote about, he was almost destroyed because he lived in a lot of those things that destroy relationships. Well, in Philippians chapter 2, 3-8, Jesus gives us a beautiful picture of what it takes to stay in love. And this is how it reads. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Let's pray together. Father God, thank you for these words that you gave to Paul. Now, Lord, speak to us. May we have ears that hear and hearts to listen. May you transform us today. Amen. A number of years ago, and I wasn't here in Marion, again, a real life situation, I counseled this couple, and I had met with them separately for a number of weeks, and I would listen to their stories, and I'd meet with her in one city, and I'd meet with him in another city, rather tiring, but I really wanted to see these two get back together, so I willingly, met with them separately. And as I listened to their stories as I listened to the stories, I learned that everything they talked about is what the other person needed to do to change. And they told me, being, the messenger man, they said, would you be sure and tell them this? And I did, but it didn't work. I knew it wouldn't work. But as I listened to the stories, and they both were saying this about that person, and the other person was saying about that person. And as I listened to them both, they both were right and they both were wrong. Their focus, as I listened to the stories, was always on the other person's faults, their failures, what they were doing wrong. And each one of them thought, and this is the clincher, each one of them thought they were right. That person is the one who needed to change. They both wanted it their way. And she wasn't coming back to him unless he did this, and he wasn't coming back to her unless she did this. And needless to say, as I read that list, they didn't stay in love. And I brought them together for one last-ditch effort in my office. And I think if I would have let her, she would have killed him. She was livid. He wasn't exactly kind. They were both right and they were both wrong. But neither wanted to stop playing the blame game. Both of them refused to give up their childish behavior. Neither one of them wanted to give up their selfishness. And when that happens in any kind of relationship, married or not, the outcome is always failure. When you're always pointing out the other person's faults, when you're always pointing out their failures, when you're always pointing out something in their life that's not right, you both lose. In that relationship I was talking about, they were keeping score of who was right and who was wrong, how she's right, how he's wrong, and it was like a competition. And when you make it a competition, it's going to lead to failure. Both of them were self-centered, thinking they weren't self-centered. Both of them were trying to impress each other about how right they were and how wrong the other person was. And the bottom line is, they both, as my observation, refused to grow up. They just like keeping score. She said this, and they actually had a list. And folks, if you want to stay in love, don't keep score. We learned that last week, 1 Corinthians 13. You keep no record of wrongs. But that's what we're really good at. And we remember what they did. Remember, ladies, that thing I told you can't bring anything back up against us 7 months ago? All right? But boy, we remember those things, especially when they hurt. We remember them. We don't let them go, do we? And it ends up destroying the relationship. It ends up building a brick wall. And we don't even realize it. And we destroy one another, and we think we're right, and they think they're right, and we keep score, and we write down, we keep a mental score. If we don't write it down, we keep it in the back of our mind, and so, that justifies the next thing that we do to them or the thing we don't do for them. We justify that, say, what, they really don't deserve me. Well, on the flip side of all this, there are some good stories, and we happen to have a good story. We got a lot of good stories here, but one particular good story here, and they're willing to meet with me today and allowing me to interview them today, is Joe and Carolina. Joe and Carolina, would you come on up? Joe and Carolina, how long have you guys been married? Almost 3 years, so they know almost everything there is to know about marriage, after 3 years. And so that's why I asked them. Actually, they've lived out everything. Can you help me carry this, Joel? They lived out everything I've said to them. We counseled together, but they agreed today, and I get to see them every day here. And I get to see them work, on their relationship with one another. And I thought, you know what? I asked if they'd be willing to be interviewed, just to say, just to give you some ideas. Thank you guys, first of all, for doing this. Question number 1, what are some things you have learned about each other that you discovered over the last 3 years? Were some of your expectations right about them and your marriage? Thank you. And did anything surprise you about the other person? Like, oh, my stars, I can't believe that. No. What are some things that you have learned about each other that you've discovered over the last few years? And as a part of that question, were some of your expectations that you had about the other person, were they right? And did anything surprise you?
Well, we were talking about these last night, actually. One of the things that I really learned since we got married is that she takes a lot of encouragement to do things that she likes to do. She doesn't take a lot of encouragement to do things that she doesn't like to do, which is weird. The things that she really enjoys and like goals that she has, like for instance her pottery. She's a really great artist, really good potter. But it took a lot of encouragement to actually get her to the point where she was willing to spend the money to get started on it. And so it just, it's not that she's not a driven person, but she just takes encouragement to do a lot of things.
So that's one thing you discovered, right? Okay, all right. What about that? What about you, Carolina?
This one was really hard for me.
Yeah.
I promise I'll have better answers for all the others. But it was really hard to think of, like, okay, I mean, obviously everything that I know about him, I know at this point. But which things did I not know earlier? It was kind of hard to tell the difference. But I think I learned a lot, well, the things he would want me to share especially, but, or there were less of them. But I learned that he's a lot more willing to give, I think, than I thought that he would be. I don't know why I didn't think he would be. But, and also just lots of little things, like how, when he's stressed out, when he's angry, when he's whatever, what does he need? And most of the time it's space. I'm an extrovert. I like people. I think around people all the time. I can't fathom why you would want to be alone for more than 20 minutes. He's an introvert. So I think learning how to live that out, how to have lots of quiet time. And that's a good thing for him. He's not angry. He just likes silence.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
So that was a surprise to you as well. That answered that part of that. Okay.
I think I knew it, but the difference came from once we lived together, got married, and seeing the reality of it. We adjusted to it just fine, but
That leads perfectly into that question then, because you kind of answered it too. You can just, what adjustments have you made? As your relationship has gone, like cleaning the house, fixing dinner, etc. What are some things that you do that you weren't expecting to do? And why were you willing to make the adjustments? You go ahead and go. So you kind of.
I think when we first got married, I had this idea of perfect Christian wife, and I don't know where I got it from or why I got it, but it basically involved having really clean windows all the time, and, no dust, and lots of baked goods. And I realized I wasn't doing that because I liked it. I like having a kind of clean house, but not for that much. And I wasn't doing it because it meant anything to him, because he doesn't notice when the windows are clean or not. He likes the baked goods. I definitely wasn't doing it to serve God. I was doing it to serve this idea of the perfect Christian woman, which is a very empty thing to serve. And it was pretty early on in our marriage, probably within 2 months. But one day, he would go down the basement and work on projects or play video games. And he'd be like, "Do you want help cleaning up there?" I'd be like, No, it's fine. Just let me be. I'll clean it up. And then I realized, you know what? I don't like this. I'm resenting the fact that he has fun, but I have no reason not to. He's offering to help. He's saying, "Do you want help?" And I'm saying, no. So I think the biggest thing, which is weird, it's not so much that I'm doing more than I thought I would do. Maybe I'm doing less, and I'm giving up that idea of I need to be this Christian wife, and I just don't think about it. Whatever works for us, and that's what we do. I know a little bit about motorcycles than I thought I would.
That's awesome.
Knife making and stuff like that.
All right, Joe.
Well, I expected to have my leather easy chair preened and fluffed, and I expected to have my slippers laid out. And dinner made by the time I got home. And my wife in an evening gown of pearls. And that is something about it. Anything close to what it is. No. I don't really. We were again talking about last night, and the biggest adjustment that we made has been since I started working here. My mornings have opened up, and I'm more centered toward the afternoon because that's when the kids get here. And so I do a lot of housework in the morning. And really, kind of the idea behind that, I guess, is, it almost seems like, well, that's not fair, I do housework, but it's like, no, but she doesn't have to do it, so when we both get home in the evenings, she doesn't have to do as much, and I don't have to do as much, so we're both happier, so we get to have more fun together.
Cool.
So kind of adjusting so that we're able to get everything done that needs to get done, and still be able to have a lot of fun in the evenings when we're both.
Enjoying one another.
Yeah. Rather than like just shoving it all off onto her and letting her do her stuff and me do my stuff. And just kind of trying to do it all together, I guess. So.
Okay. So what are some keys you've discovered to staying in love? You guys kind of hit on a few of them. That, other than saying yes, dear, as we learned last week, can't use that one. What are some things that you're doing? And I see you guys in action here. What are some things you're doing to keep your relationship vibrant and growing? What are some of the things you guys have done? I see you guys here at lunch every day, having lunch together, things like that. Eating together and making that point to be together at lunchtime. So what are some of the things that you do like that to keep it vibrant?
Yeah, I think what you guys were talking about was everything in God's kingdom is upside down. It's just flipped upside down from everything that we say we're supposed to have. So in God's kingdom, I am not owed justice.
Yeah.
I am not owed, I don't deserve to get my way. Even if I'm wronged, if someone asks you for your cloak, give them your shirt as well. Go with them 2 miles when they ask you to go 1. I am not owed anything in God's kingdom. I'm owed to be able to serve. But I have no rights. I have no things that are owed me. And I want to clarify this. I am not talking about any kind of abuse. That is a different thing. That is not God's plan.
Right.
But you don't deserve anything. And so I think all that you're is to give. And I think, I grew up in the church, and all my life I heard this, and I was like, this sounds terrible. So I was really kind of afraid of marriage, just because everyone talks about it like you just have to give and give no matter what. You will be angry. You will hate it. But you know what? That's God's plan. And it's true. But, and this is the huge but, I think when we start to live it out, what it ends up being is it's give and give, because he does the same thing for me. We both realized, I'm grateful to realize this kind of early on, I'm not owed to have the last word in a fight. I'm not owed any of these things. I'm just owed to give and to serve. And I think when I do that, when I listen to him and I learn about who he is, he just becomes this amazing person that new layers of him will come out and things I didn't know. And even you ever have an enemy, someone you can't stand, and then you learn something about them, they're going through something or whatever, and you're like, oh, man, that totally explains why they were acting like a jerk. I'm not that mad at them anymore. It's kind of like that. When I'm willing to listen, kind of like, oh, well, whatever.
Okay.
As well as it becomes easy and joyful to love, and you give up your dreams, because you're not owed your dreams either. But really, in doing this together, he's helped me. He cares about the dreams that I have, and I care about the dreams that he has. And together, we both have dreams that were bigger than the ones that we had for ourselves on our own. And it's kind of an exciting thing, but it only unfolds when you give up everything.
You just made the last point of my sermon, so we're going to cut it off.
You guys can go home early.
That's right, we go home early.
Tagging along with that, we were talking with somebody the other day about marriage, and really, they said, well, it's really just kind of a give and take, I think. And we kind of got to talk about it. It's really not a give and take, it's a give and give. And so, you don't take, you receive from the other person, but you don't take anything. You just give, and you trust that they're going to give back. A lot of the things that I think have helped keep our relationship vibrant, though, are just little things like eating lunch together, but also lots of kisses, lots of cuddles, and lots of, just little things like that. And little things that turn into big things like saying I love you constantly, and making sure that it's known, as well as things like never going to bed angry. That's one of the rules in our house is you're not allowed to go to bed angry. If we're having an argument or something right before we go to bed, we at least get it to where we're not angry, and then we go to bed, and then we wake up, we wake up in the morning. But
Get not angry fast, because the tighter you get, the angrier.
the point being, though, that there's no reason to let stuff like that fester as you sleep or as you try to sleep. You don't get good sleep anyway when you're angry, so you may as well deal with it before you go to bed. That's kind of one of the rules in our house. One of the things that has helped us keep vibrant, I think. So.
Cool.
I want to add one more thing. I think for us, it's a lot easier just to let things go.
I can sit down here. You can preach the rest of the time, Carolyn.
It's me to have it, just, I don't know, just let it go.
Yeah.
This was her favorite question.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, I like this one.
Yeah. So what are you doing now for the other that you didn't think you'd be doing now? The last question. Think about, you had these expectations. What are you doing now you didn't think, oh man, I can't believe I'm doing this now. Like for me, it was, I promised my wife when we got married, this was the clincher for her, I'm sure, that I would clean the bathrooms. And I didn't do it for the first 20 plus years. So what's changed for you guys in that kind of way? It's like, oh man, I can't believe I'm doing this now. I had no idea I'd be. Or you guys can read this question right there, and maybe that'll help. It's a little bit longer. I didn't want to ask the whole thing.
All right. I think there's a lot of different things. I mean, finding out what things that communicate love to him is important.
Okay.
It communicates love to me and how he communicates love to him. I think the biggest thing is just to take the time to know him, because, in 6 months he's not going to be the same person that he is today, and he's not the same person right now that he was even like a week ago. But it's so easy to kind of just I don't know, there's a lot of business aspects to life. It's easy to get caught up in okay, pay this bill, okay, all right, well, what's our plan for this week? Okay, we're doing this, and this. All right, got that. Nothing else to talk about. But we don't thrive when anything like that is happening. We thrive when taking the time to know him, and know his dreams and his passions, things make him excited, the things that are making him crazy right now. What is angering him? Who means a lot to him right now in his life? What are the things, his goals that are coming up? They're just things like that. Do I actually know him? Do I know what's going on in his life? And a lot of times, we take time to ask each other questions about those kind of things. Sometimes I'm surprised by the answers, and that's showing me man, I really need to take time to know these things. And I think that's a really important thing in any relationship, in a friendship, in father-child, mother-child, no matter which side of it you are. God cares about all these relationships. And do you know the person, or are you just in love with this idea of the person that you have?
Yeah.
So taking the time to know who they are.
Good point.
I think, and the important thing is just finding out what communicates love to him at that certain time. Sometimes it's letting him play a video game. Sometimes it's getting out of the house and doing something together, and just finding time to be alone together.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think, did you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay.
No. In a way, it's kind of like studying her. And it's not really a term, but it does work. Learning what it is that makes her feel cared for. Whether that be encouraging her to do pottery or to kids ministry or whatever it is. Just whatever it takes to encourage her to be the person that she wants to grow into. Just making sure that I know what those things are so that I can encourage her those ways.
I learned about motorcycles for him.
There you go.
She did.
I know what CCs means.
That's awesome. Oh, well, I want to hear it now. Yeah, now that you said it, what does CCs mean?
The size of the engine.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you, guys. If we would give it up for them. Thanks, guys. But as you can hear, learning, and it's one of the points, actually, they made all the points that I'm going to be making today. But as you listen to them, and then again, those of you who've been married, that have been married for a long time, a lot of what, we were taught was, give and take. But the concept they introduced, today was, to give and give. A lot of times we spend a lot of time taking from another person when we really haven't given them anything. We just continue to take and to take and take. And as a bonus point today, and it's free, to stay in love, is to capture that concept of give and give. I think the greatest thing, in any relationship, whether it be husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, friendship, the greatest way, to demonstrate that love is to serve them, to give and to give and to give and to give. Well, what about me? Well, it's not about you. It's about you giving and giving, and then the other person returns, gives back. Gives back, and it kind of works. Just think about a relationship where you're always giving to one another, not and receiving what's given, but also giving back, not out of obligation or out of the idea. Thank you for clarifying that. Or the idea I have to do this, but actually saying, God, what is a way that I can serve that person that would bless them and not be about me? And I think a lot of times, when we're in a relationship, we spend a lot of time thinking about who? Me, my needs. And we expect that another individual to meet all of our needs, or at least we have an expectation that they would meet most of our needs. And as you heard them share, they don't owe you anything. They don't. You owe them everything. Because when you're in that type of relationship, and I get this from Jesus, just so you know, and when you're giving everything, to me, as you look at that, and as you study the scriptures, and the passage that we're going to go a little bit further into, when you're giving everything, you don't have room for yourself. So in this passage of Scripture in Philippians 2, Paul's teaching us how to stay in love. First, next thing he says is be humble, thinking of others better than yourself. He says if you want to stay in love, act like your spouse, your girlfriend or boyfriend is more important than you. Whatever relationship it is, act like they are more important to you. And the big question comes there, and I kind of, especially Joe and Carolina's relationship, but what if they take advantage of me? Well, it didn't seem to bother us in the dating and the engagement stages when they took advantage of you, did it? You were willing to put the risk in there. So what changes? And it didn't seem to bother us then. These are the stages. Those are the stages. That dating and engagement, or those are the stages where we're trying to win their heart and convince them, "Hey, I'm the person for you," or whatever that happens for you. And these are just stages where we are not only want them to love us, we want them to even like us. We go out of our way to make the other person special and feel special. And to put it biblically, we think of pleasing them more than we think of pleasing ourselves. I've told this story. When I was dating my wife, I used to drive across town to set her garbage out on the corner. I said, the only way this is going to stop is if I marry her, Then I don't have to drive as far. Isn't that true, though? Then I used to come over. Then that was when we were engaged and we're in the things. Well, what if she took advantage of me? Well, she never did. But what if she did? Would I have still? Yeah, I still would have because what I wanted to win their hearts. Okay, but something happens, something happens, especially when you say I do. We think that all changes, but it really doesn't. If we're going to stay in love and keep it vibrant and strong and keep it going, to continue to serve them in the way you were before you were even married. Trying to win their heart, they said daily, trying to win their heart daily. and said, well, we've been married for 40 years. I don't have to do anything else to win their heart. Well, maybe you don't. But it's the idea that, hey, you know what? I still want to date this person. My love for them is vibrant. The love for I have them is not a noun. It's a verb. It's active. And I want to demonstrate to them just how much they mean to me. And you think of them more than you think of yourself. But somehow when we say those words, I do, or we enter into a deeper relationship, something begins to change inside of us that shouldn't change, I believe. And that is, boy, to serve them to the best of our ability, to love them, the way Jesus loved us. So they could take advantage of you. They could take advantage of you, but folks, that's not your problem. If God is honestly speaking to you, then you are the one who humbles yourself. If he's the one speaking to you, and you know it's God speaking to you, you are the one to humble yourself, whether that other person does or not. And folks, they might not humble themselves. But as we learn, and I just kind of mentioned, love is a verb, and it's not a feeling, it's a decision. It's not a feeling. Your spouse or your special someone is going to disappoint you someday. Those who've been married quite a while, has that not been true? Did your spouse not disappoint you at least once in your married life? Yeah. It's going to happen. But love is a verb. And I tell a lot of young couples, when I'm counseling them, before they're getting married, the number one thing that you can do for one another. Do you know what I say to them? The number one thing that you can do for one another is not having sex. It's disappointing one another. Because didn't you discover the kind of love you have for them? Then you discover where you need to work in your life. Kind of odd, but still, boy, we don't disappoint them intentionally. We don't go out of our way to say, oh, I got to find out how much they love me, so I'm going to disappoint them today. I think you understand, the spirit of what I'm saying is that sometimes there's just, like you saw in that little video, sometimes both of us mess up. The greatest thing you can do, the greatest thing you can do is this disappoint one another. And boy, you need to discover, man, boy, they really do love me. And when you're valuing the other person more than yourself, you make decisions based on the understanding that they are more important to you. And let me repeat that. When you are valuing the other person more than yourself, you make decisions based on the understanding that they are more important to you. And folks, that's hard, especially when you think and know you are right, isn't it? See, the goal in any relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, whatever it is, it's not, we get in discussions and heated arguments and because we disagree with one another and really, at least the objective for a lot of guys is they want to win the argument. And, in retaliation, the other person wants to win the argument too. And, folks, it's not about being right. It's about the willingness to lose the argument and do the right thing. How many of you want to lose the argument for the sake of the relationship? But, boy, our heart and our desire, is to say, I want to win this. I'm right, and I got to prove to them that I am right because this is going to make our relationship stronger when that person knows I'm absolutely right and they're absolutely wrong. It doesn't work. It never has. But we got to win. And when you value that other person more than yourself, you always choose to do the right thing. If you want to stay in love, value the other person more than yourself, even when they disappoint you. That's easy to do. So how do you treat someone who has more value than you? Well, when I'm talking about that, I'm not talking about them being better than you. If you go to a wedding, I'm sure most of us in here has been to at least one. Who's the most valuable person of the wedding? Who is it? Anybody guess? Is it the pastor? Everybody claps when the pastor. Oh, man, doesn't he look good in that tie? Woo! Man. When the groomsmen walk in, oh, man, look. Yeah, they look sharp today. Or when the bridesmaids are walking up, they get a little bit more accolades. It's got to be the singer. The singer is the one who makes the wedding. We know that. The sound man, everybody praises the sound man. Now, who is it? Who do we stand up for? The bride. Is she any more special than anybody else in the room? No. But on that day, in that context, we literally learn, boy, to sit back and let her have the stage. And eventually let them have the stage. You show her respect. It's not about you. How many of you, when you walk into a wedding, people say, oh, there they are. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Oh, wow. Woo. Maybe Anthony, but nobody else. No. It's a thing of respect. It's a thing of, boy, you put yourself below them. Not because they're better than you, but because you know. Because you know they are the one in the spotlight. So how do you treat someone who's more valuable than you? More valuable than you? Well, you defer to them, you respect them, and you let them be right, even when they're not. And verse 4 goes on to say, don't look out for your own interests, but take an interest in their interests. And Carolina gave a beautiful illustration of that. She's learned about motorcycles. I don't even know what a CC is, Carolina. Boy, to take that, and I know, and I see them going, you see pictures if you're on Facebook and friends with them, you see them going hiking. That's one of Joe's loves. It's hiking. He took her out on a cold winter day and froze together. And if we're honest, we're only interested in what we're really interested in. But if you want to stay in love, you take an interest in what they're interested in. This is the way of showing they have more value than you do. You do it intentionally. And if you stay in love, if you want to stay in love, you love with intentionality. Something like this, Pam. Something like this.
Happy anniversary! Darling, you are the best! And I've got a special surprise for you. Jimmy John's? I am the luckiest man in the world! I'm just gonna set this over. Jimmy John's. We're online at jimmyjohns.com.
Yeah, advertise for Jimmy John's. It's a little bit like that. Doing it with intentionality. Even when you forget, call Jimmy John's. That's the point here, okay? But a lot of us might be thinking, all this talk is a little bit idealistic. It can't be done. They're nice words, Pastor. But Paul understood that we would think that way, and he understood that it was unrealistic and it's impossible to live out. And remember last week we learned that we are to love one another as Jesus loved us. And in these next few verses, Paul illustrates to each one of us the way Jesus loves you and me. He says, I want you to approach your relationship with the other person the same way Jesus approaches his relationship with you. Look what he says in verse 6. Though he was God, he did not think equality with God as something he could cling to. Now, folks, this is Jesus. Jesus didn't think he was more important than anybody else. Jesus never pulled rank on anyone. Jesus never used his godship to his advantage. And he never considers himself, and this is the clincher, he never considered himself holier than the other person. Because who did he hang around with? Yeah, prostitutes, tax collectors. And he never considered himself holier than them. Boy, in a lot of relationships, You know, a lot of relationships, boy, we think, you know, and there's some cases where we think we're better than them because of, you know, whatever it might be. And if we apply this to our relationships, you are not more important than the other person you're with. You might think you have more value because you bring the money into the house. You might think you have more value because you give birth to children. You might think you have more value simply because, well, you think too much of yourself. But neither of you is more than the other. And when we think we are more important, we begin to play God in the relationship. But even Jesus didn't play the role of God, and he was God. But if you want to stay in love, one must think, not just of themselves and how important they are to the relationship, but think how important the other person is to the relationship. And to stay in love, folks, we must think the other person is more important. Can you imagine what the world would be like? Not just in a marriage relationship or a dating relationship or anything like that. Just thinking in any relationship, if we truly value that other person more than we value ourselves, do you see how that would change our attitude towards that other person? They have more value than me. And I think that's exactly what they were attracted to in Jesus. And Paul continues to say, instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. First of all, we must understand what it means to be full of yourself. In our culture, we say, when we see someone, when we see them, we say that particular someone is full of himself. Well, what does that mean? Well, usually it refers that the person is only concerned about how it turns out for them. And we say, man, that person is full of himself. But Jesus emptied himself. He willingly gave up his godness. He made himself a servant. And if you want to stay in love, willingly empty yourself. Stop trying to be their God and take yourself off your own pedestal and start becoming that person's servant. And then serve them and elevate them. And then he continues in verse 8. He willingly humbled himself. That's really critical. No one did it for him. He made the decision to humble himself. Folks, he made a conscious decision. Well, he was God. It was easy. No, he made a conscious decision to humble himself. And in any relationship, many of us need to make a conscious decision to humble ourselves. And if you want to stay in love, decide to humble yourself. Decide to submit yourself. Decide to subordinate yourself to them. And Jesus demonstrated this by, and again, in and out, humbling yourself in obedience to God. He humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Jesus willingly gave his life so that we might stay in love with his Father. That's our example. And the question is, are you willing to die to yourself to stay in love? Are you willing to die to your childish behaviors? Are you willing to die to your desire to be right? Are you willing to die to your selfish behaviors? And folks, that's true in any relationship, but especially in those marriage relationship or dating relationships. Are you willing to die to yourself and allow that person to have more value than you? A childishness says it's all about me. Childlikeness says, hey, what can I do for you? And this morning as we sing, I really believe, I was sharing this with Jonathan, it's going to be kind of the theme of next week. I really believe we can only love as much as we love another person, as much as we understand how much God loves us. I really do believe that. Because God is love. He is the creator of love. We don't create love. Folks, we don't know how to love one another. He even had to tell his disciples what it meant to love one another. We don't know how to love. And Jesus gives us this example of how to love one another, whether you're married or not, or whether you're in a relationship or not. He teaches us how to love other people. And he says, serve them, defer to them, And folks, Jesus willingly laid down his life Boy, are we willing to die? Are we willing to empty ourselves? Are we willing to elevate that other person, even when they're wrong? That's the hardest part. That really is the hardest part. Are we willing to die to ourselves? And folks, I honestly believe that when you're willing to die to your stuff, it affects their life greatly.